And finally, the last thing that I will talk to you about from chapter 4 are the two types of processing, top-down and bottom-up processing. Now, the fact that I'm only highlighting these few things, so hopefully you've watched the segment about self-fulfilling prophecy and pluralistic ignorance, and you watched a segment on the two types of processing, and now this one, I'm sorry, two types of thinking, and now this one deals with two types of processing. So that does not mean that these are the only three things, or the only few things that you need to read about in chapter 2, obviously, in chapter 4, obviously, but those are the things that are either challenging or perhaps defined in a confusing way in the textbook, or the two different types of system of thinking are not even in your textbook at all, in the form that I presented them. So let me share my screen. Start going. Okay. So to preface the discussion of bottom-up and top-down processing, it's a cognitive term. It's a term from cognitive psychology. So every time you're perceiving something, and I'm going to use visual information, I'm going to use visual stimulus as an example, because most of the processing we do is visual, and a lot of research has been done on visual processing. So whenever you are seeing something, there are two types of processing working at the same time. The receptors in your brain, the receptors in the sense organs, right, in the eyes, process the features of the stimulus itself, the lines, the curves, the relationship of different, parts of the object, to help us recognize what it is. So receptors in our eyes send that information to the brain, and that's kind of raw information that is in the stimulus itself. Okay, and that of course contributes to our recognition of an object or a person. Right? At the same time as this is happening, at the same time as we're processing the information in the stimulus itself, our higher order cognition, our memory, sends information kind of downwards to aid perception, right? Our prior knowledge, our expectations, our processing of the context in which we're viewing the stimulus, right? All of that is working together with our eyes processing the actual features of the stimulus. Okay, so when we are focusing on the features of the stimulus, we're basically building the perception from the bottom up. We start with very primitive elements of the stimulus processed by our receptors, and we move up to a more complex process of perception. So that's what bottom up refers to. It does not mean that we're looking at an object from the bottom and go up, right? That's not what it means. At the same time, we have our prior expectations that are kind of higher order cognitive processes, kind of working their way down to the less complex process of perception, right? And so they're helping us put these details from the stimulus into context to try to arrive at a perception, right? Of course, these two things happen very, very quickly. We cannot disentangle as things are happening in real time. We cannot kind of uncouple them and isolate, oh, this is bottom-up processing, this is top-down processing, right? They're happening together in unison and help us accomplish what we call perception. When we recognize an object or a person and we say, ah, that's a car, or we say, oh, that's my friend Mary, for example. And so that's just a quick preface of what this means. So at any given moment when we're perceiving something, both of these processes operate in unison together at the same time. Okay, so most processing, again, involves processing information in the stimulus itself and processing context in which that stimulus is encountered, and also prior knowledge and expectations. Okay, so again, like I said, when information in the stimulus drives our perception, we call that bottom-up processing, right? It is also known as stimulus-driven or data-driven processes. So we focus on the element in the actual stimulus. Okay? Stimulus driven or data driven processing. We're working with the raw data that we have, and that raw data comes in the form of visual stimulus. Okay, now when context and expectations drive our perception, top-down processing is occurring. We don't focus on the stimulus elements, we rely on higher order cognitive process. Again, I want to say that whenever we perceive something, both of these are working together. But if we were to separate them, then those will be the two components. Focusing on the stimulus and having our prior knowledge, expectations, and context help us accomplish perception and make the identification of what it is we're looking at. Okay. You may have heard about these processes, the top-down processes, being called knowledge-driven or conceptually driven. Right? So it's not driven by what's in the stimulus, it's driven by our prior experience, which may or may not be relevant to a situation at hand, right? Okay, so to illustrate, I'm going to show you this. Pause the video after I gave you instructions. And so I want you to think about what it is that you see. And something obvious will jump out at you and you'll be like, oh, of course it's that. Okay, so I want you to just kind of look at it and write down the 5 things that this could be. 5 things. So if you're just looking at this black stimulus on the white, background, what could this be? So please pause the recording and just kind of brainstorm what this could be. So hopefully you've all done that and thought of some other things in addition to the, so the most obvious 2 choices that people make, one or the other, it's either a letter B or number 13. And then hopefully if you thought about this for a few more minutes, you were able to come up with maybe some more creative possibilities of what this could be. Now, what about now? So if you look at this stimulus, what do you see? Most of us now will see this, overwhelming majority will see this as number 13, right? Why? Because it is in the context of, it's between numbers 12 and 14. And we know from prior experience that the number that goes between 12 and 14 is 13. Right? Now, you could say, well, this could be a letter B. It could be a letter B. But again, overwhelming majority, if you show them this array, they will perceive this as number 13. Right? Because that's what the context suggests. That's what prior knowledge tells us. Okay. Now, what about this? If you see it in this context, again, this is the exact same stimulus that I showed you 2 slides ago on the white background without anything else. Okay. When you see it in the context of these 2 things around it, overwhelming majority of people will see this as letter B. Now, some of you are looking at it and you're like, oh, I still see 13. It's possible, but it's, again, if you show this if you just show this to people and ask them to identify this without giving them the lecture on bottom up and top down and without showing them this in isolation, most people would not even think twice about it. They'll be like, that's a letter B, right? Because again, some of them might say, well, this says A13C. Yes, but it's not something that our prior experience would suggest. It's not what the context here suggests. It's not what we expect to see, right? What we expect to see between letters A and C is a letter B. And when we see an array of letters, we usually expect all of them to be letters. We do not expect to see a number just kind of randomly, springing up there. So the reason we process this as overwhelmingly B here is that it's surrounded by letters A and C, which our knowledge tells us the letter between A and C, our prior knowledge, the letter between A and C is the letter B. Okay. So now I'll give you some examples of when we are more likely to rely on bottom up versus top down. So there are very, very few situations. Actually, I would say there are probably no situations where we just use bottom up processing or just use top down processing, right? Because they're always working together. Right? Now, I will give you a couple of examples of when you're more likely to rely on one versus the other, even though understanding that both of them are happening at the same time. So, for example, if you are putting together a Lego thing and you have instructions, and on the instructions it tells you, okay, you need to find this particular part, right? So it has to be, and it shows you what it is. It has to be, let's say, a yellow thick piece. So let's say something like this with eight little pegs, right? You can, so you have, in order to find that specific piece, you have to look very carefully, and you have to look for not just the yellow pieces, not just the thick pieces, not just the piece with 8 pegs, but all the piece that has all 3 of those conditions, that meets all 3 of those conditions, right? So this is one situation where you really have to look at the elements of the stimulus in order to accomplish your task. Okay, so again, you would start with simplest elements of the stimulus. You process the color, you process the thickness, you process the number of little pegs, right? The little, you know, whatever, the things that stick up, right? And then, of course, your prior knowledge also plays a role, but this is where you really need to pay attention to the stimulus more so than your prior knowledge, because your prior knowledge is not going to help you much, because you actually have to look for specific features in this piece, right? And in fact, it is fairly difficult to find examples of tasks where we rely mostly on bottom-up processing. For the most part, our perception is driven by top-down. So I want you to think, before Thursday's class, I want you to think of other examples where you might want, where you might need to, or where you might rely more on bottom-up processing than top-down. Okay, so that's your little homework for Thursday. Try to come up with examples, and then hopefully I can include them in my lectures going forward, because it's more difficult for me to come up with examples of heavily bottom-up processing, because that's not how human perception works. Okay, top-down processing. Trying to perceive and label something using prior knowledge, expectations, motivations, and or context. And again, context is what's around the stimulus that we're trying to perceive. So again, it starts at the top, not at the top of the object and proceeds down, right? But starts at the top with higher order processing and kind of proceeds down to a more primitive task of perception. Okay, now whether you perceive that stimulus initially, well, on the slides, as a B or a number 13 depends on what is around it. If there are numbers around it, we perceive it as 13. If there are letters around it, we perceive it as B. Okay, top-down processing. So you've read about schemas in chapter 2, hopefully. Or you will, if you haven't read the chapter yet, you will. Please remember that your inquisitive for chapter 4 is due on Wednesday night, right, by 11:59. So please make sure you read the chapter. So they mentioned schemas, the textbook mentions schemas, I believe, in chapter 1, and they're also mentioning schemas in this chapter. Schemas is just our organized prior knowledge. So that is the source of top-down processing, right? Our expectations of a situation, and we expect certain things from a certain situation, from a certain person, because we've had experience, either direct or indirect. So we've either dealt with these types of situations with these types of people before, or we have indirectly gained that knowledge. Somebody told us, we saw it in a movie, etc. So we have this prior knowledge, which is our schemas. So top-down processing, that's like the well from which top-down processing gets its energy. Kind of. So top-down processing is extremely helpful, just like schemas are extremely helpful. They help us save time and processing resources, because remember, we have a finite amount of attention and mental capacity at any given time, right? So how we use it is tremendously important. So if we can use something to help us use less energy to process the thing in front of us, if we can kind of take a shortcut and say, this looks like a Lego piece. I'm looking in the bin full of Lego pieces, for example. So therefore, this red thing that I see, that's got to be a Lego piece, because this is what my prior experience tells me, that all of these colorful little things that are in the bin with all the other Lego pieces, it's got to be a Lego piece, right? So it saves us time. It saves us processing resources, our schema, right? And for the most part, frequently, it leads us to an accurate perception, right? So it's really, really helpful. But sometimes we see what we expect to see, but not what's actually in front of us. So sometimes our schemas kind of get ahead of us and suggest to us what it is we should be perceiving based on prior knowledge. But that's not actually what is in front of us. So we misperceive something in line with our schematic knowledge. So this is very, very important. Obviously, you could see that there's a lot of potential for mistaken perception if we expect to see something, but that's not what's actually there. So what we should do to not make mistakes is every object we encounter, we should use bottom-up processing, and we should process every feature of that object or person in order to be absolutely sure that what we're looking at. But of course we don't do that. If we were to do that, we will never have we won't have an ability to do anything, because all of our attention will be focused on processing these details in everything that we see, right? Obviously that's not a good outcome. So of course we have to rely on top-down processing. And again, usually it is very helpful. It leads us to perceive correctly, but sometimes we make a mistake, right? So I am guessing that a lot of you have had this experience where you're, let's say, waiting for a friend who is supposed to come in a red, Mazda SUV, and you're looking because, the friend is going to, pull up, and you have to jump in the car quickly. So you have to see him coming to be ready. And so you see you see a car that looks like, it's red, it's an SUV, it looks like it could be your friend's, and then maybe you start waving at the driver, only to realize that, as he passes you, that that's not your friend, right? So these are the types of mistakes that top-down processing results in, when our expectations are so strong that they actually cause us to perceive something that's not there, or perceive something that's different. Okay, so this is a pretty innocuous, pretty harmless example of, okay, so you mistake, you wave to the, to the wrong person or something. It's not a big deal. Like today, for example, I was walking the dog, and there was a person walking on the other side of the street, and we frequently, when I see other people, I frequently raise my hand in a greeting, and they do the same. So I see this guy walking, and I see him raising his hand, and so I think he is greeting me, and so I raise my hand back, only to see that he was actually talking on the phone, and he was just touching his, he was using his hand to do something else. He was not waving at me. So again, this is harmless. So I'm like, okay, so I waved to a person who wasn't actually waving at me. What's the big deal? But when you come across situations where, for example, which has happened, where a police officer who expects to see a gun in a suspect's hand actually thinks he saw a gun, and then proceeds to maybe shoot that person. That is a very, very dangerous mistake that is the result of overactive top-down processing. Okay. So a police officer perceived something to be there, which was not. He perceived an object to be something it is not. The object was a phone. The police officer perceived it to be a gun, right? Frequently leads to very tragic consequences, where a police officer shoots the suspect, again, believing that he was holding a gun instead of a phone. We will talk about more examples of top-down processing. Those are easier to come up with, and perhaps some of you will want to share some of these situations in which your top-down processing was overly active and maybe led you to perceive something that's not there, or perceive something in a different way. So I look forward to hearing that from you during our class on Thursday.